What is one reason why you do this work, why you show up? You can unmute or you can put it in the chat. Would love to hear from a few of you.
I think I'll go ahead. I think about this a lot. I'm getting on the other end of my side of my career, right? I've been in this a long time, is that I had those people in my life that did this for me. And I know the impact it made. I grew up in poverty and had certain people along the way that they left this world with probably out without knowing how important they were. And so now I actually do sometimes seek some of those people out that I remember, and I just feel like I was destined to do this. I don't know what drew me there, but I always remember what was done for me before, what supports I got that made me be able to be successful in being able to, own a home and have a good family and all of that. And it was not one thing or another. It was a lot of people along the way. No matter how hard you work, and we all work hard, you never go through this life alone. You never do it alone. No matter how many people want to say they're self-made, somewhere along the line, you all have supports. And so that's why I stay with what I do and why I love what I do. It's because I know, like I said earlier, oftentimes I'm not even going to know many of the children that were impacted later in life, but I'm going to know that I did the best that I could to help shape them, assist their families, so that they would be, supported in the community. I guess that's where I see it.
Beautiful, thank you.
So I'll go next. My name is Bonita Lacey. I am an early childhood specialist from way back. So I actually was thinking while Sue was talking, and I just want to make it real simple. I started in early childhood like 30, 40, a long time ago. And I thought of it as just getting into work, just finding a job. And over the years, I found myself realizing that I really enjoyed the work. But then over some more years, I started realizing that I wanted to make an impact on the children and families that I serve that look like me. And I had to pull myself, like really think about it. Like, how can I really support the children and families that look like me? And it's more destined for me to do this work now than in the very beginning when I started. So I am really grateful for where I am in my life and my journey. And I appreciate the people that I work with.
We appreciate you. Who else would like to share? Before we start.
I'll share. This is like such a surprisingly deep question to who, right? It's so simple, but it's like, ooh, like really digs in. I was like thinking about just this like fundamental belief that I'm sure there's like a really lovely quote that I won't remember because to our earlier conversation, we're not polished people, but there's this beautiful quote around like, you can tell sort of the moral state of a country based on how they treat their children. And just like, I think that really drives a lot of the work that I want to do. Like creating this environment that surrounds children, surrounds families with young children with love and nurturing and resources and like adults that just will like endlessly love children. And just think that that says so much about the state of our world when we're able to really, really focus our time and our energy on loving children as much as they deserve to be loved. And the community, right? Like people that work in education and in early education, we're like this close-knit community that's so beautiful.
Nice.
No, we love to be in community. I will ask the question in Spanish. We have, I believe, one person who does speak Spanish. Just want to make sure she, not that she doesn't understand, but she just, can respond in a language that she feels comfortable. Fabiola, te voy a decir en español la pregunta que estamos ahorita contestando. Lo puedes decir, responder en español y luego yo lo puedo traducir, o también en inglés. La pregunta era, ¿por qué haces lo que haces? ¿O por qué haces el trabajo que haces ahorita?
Ok, dame un segundo. Para que me vean, no, es que mis pelos están bien parados y no quiero que me los vean. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I have 6 children, and I got involved with the community when I was invited by Ruth Evangelista. That she saw that I had many kids, and she said, "Hey, I need you because you have many kids." And I started getting involved in the programs because my children. And later we saw that we work really well together, and we see that we need a lot of projects for the children. We see that the community needs a lot of help, and that's why I get involved. And I started working with her for a long, long time, and now we're here. That's my little story.
Thanks, Favi. So good to see you.
Thank you.
Everyone. So let's jump in. Thank you all for being open to the flow of things and just kind of moving with spirit as we go through. So just for those of you that maybe haven't come to one of our, I think everyone here has been in one of these spaces in the past. This group is for the coaching and training folks. So that means that you're working directly with individuals working with children. So you could be a coach, you could be like a mentor for FFN families. You could be in a licensed setting, but really your lens is kind of how can I support people working directly with children? So we've sort of settled in a little bit in a really beautiful way. And then now we're going to move into kind of the topic that we're focused on today that really came out of this group. Folks in this group asked for a space to explore cultural humility. What does it mean? How can I practice it better? So that's what we're going to jump into. I'm going to start with just a very quick overview of a framework that our brilliant Fani found for us. We asked her to go into the World Wide Web and see what people are talking about with cultural humility. And she brought this really robust, beautiful framework to share with all of you today. So we'll describe that. It's just a way to start thinking about what we mean when we say cultural humility. And then we have our beloved Norma Garcés here with us today. She's a longtime friend of many of us and really has spent her life thinking about these things, trying to figure out how can I create spaces that are more nurturing for Black and Brown children? How can I do that in systems that are bureaucratic and layered and sometimes difficult? So we're going to have an informal conversation with her, like, what are you learning? What are you thinking about these days? That sort of thing. If time allows, we have created a space to let you kind of digest in pairs. Sometimes that helps to get out of the big room to kind of process some of these things, and then we'll close. So that's what we have prepared for you today. So as we transition to this topic, what is a word, phrase, or image that comes to mind for you when you hear cultural humility? I know for our team, when we started thinking about this, we were like, well, what about cultural competence and cultural alignment? There's so many terms out there now about culture. So we wanted to ask you, as we start this conversation, what is a word, phrase, or image that comes up for you when you hear cultural humility? You can put it in the chat or come off mute.
I think for me, it is knowing that I seek to understand, but I don't know everything, and you can't know everything because each person that you work with has their own pieces of their culture, of their life that they bring to the table. And so to me, it's about being open to hearing and working individually and collectively with small groups to better understand.
Thank you. Who else would like to share word, phrase, or image when you think of cultural humility? And if you don't, that's okay too.
An image that comes to mind is just like an ear, like this, like, like seeking to understand people, right? This listening ear.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So I'd mentioned that our beloved Fani found a framework for us that we loved. It may be familiar to some of you in the room. It actually was developed in the 90s from healthcare, two women of color that were working in healthcare at the time. And we're seeing some things in a clinical setting, and they really unpacked what wasn't working and what was needed moving forward. And so they developed this framework, and it has 3 components to it. And at the very top, the very first thing that they will often say is that cultural humility it has no end point. Very similar to what Sue just said, that it's not like you get a certificate or you get a sticker to say that you have arrived, you are now certified as culturally humble, that it's really more of an orientation, a philosophy, a way of approaching people in life. And they really unpacked 3 pillars that kind of hold up this philosophy. The first is, and we'll go through each of these very quickly, but the first is lifelong learning and critical self-reflection. The second is recognizing and changing power imbalances. And then the third is really helping our institutions embody these other principles. So how can we help institutions become more accountable in the ways that they show up and work with humans? So I'm just going to go through each of these really quickly to give you kind of a flavor of how they've been thinking about this in their work. So principle 1, this lifelong learning and self-reflection. In their language, it's really about your personal growth and your personal evolution and your personal learning. And it's really not only about other people, but it's also about yourself and really unpacking and exploring who you are. And I think it's Dr. Trevelyan, one of the authors, said, each of us is multidimensional and complex. So, I could look at you and maybe make some assumptions about who you are, what you believe, what your politics are, but you don't really know. People are very complicated in a beautiful way. And I think now more than ever, we're starting to create some more space for people to express their complexity. But certainly it isn't always safe for people to show us all of the dimensions of who they are. And so they really hold this as kind of the core, one of the core principles is that you're never done learning, even about yourself. Like you can never really get there. And there's a clip that we want to show you that kind of tells, oops, wait, hold on. I have to share my sound. A clip, they have a documentary that we really liked. It's available on YouTube. If you're really interested in any of this stuff, highly recommend that you check that out. But here's a clip of one young woman's story on learning, lifelong learning.
I first became passionate about cultural humility. As an undergraduate student, I was interning with an organization, and they were holding a cultural competency training for Pacific Islanders and working with Pacific Islander communities. And as a biracial Pacific Islander woman, I was really excited and anxious to attend the training and to really learn about the material that was going to be sort of discussed and how others were going to learn, and myself included, about Pacific Islander culture and working with Pacific Islanders around health issues that were important to the community. And I think after attending the training, I realized that there was a sense of achievement and completion for those who participated. And I then was introduced to cultural humility as an undergraduate student in a class, just so happened around the same time. And I realized that a sense of achievement and accomplishment and competence and understanding sort of limits your learning.
So super short clip, but she kind of says a lot in there. She talks about this cultural competence experience she went through where you kind of learned all these things about people and then went to a cultural humility experience, which was different. Like there was no endpoint, there was no achievement, there was no like certification. And it really gave her that contrast of what we're talking about when we say cultural humility. Um, Not to say that you don't need to have a working knowledge of people's history and their geography and experiences. I think that is a part of the work, but really it's deeper and more evolving than that. You're always learning, you're always giving people an opportunity to show up as they are, and you're also discovering that about yourself. So this is how the authors have kind of laid out the first principle of lifelong learning. So what does this bring up for you as an example of something maybe that you've been on a journey on that you're learning about? What are some examples that folks can share on this first principle?
What comes to mind for me, I work at a community health center, and we always think that we do a good job connecting with community, but then a new community moves into the area that we serve. And so it's a new group of people that we need to learn about. And so we're never done learning about our community because community shifts.
Mm-hmm. Always, yeah. Anyone else?
Hello, everyone. I was just going to share that I just got off a history of inequities training like an hour ago.
Oh.
And a couple staff and I just reflected that, we learn so much about history, but we don't remind ourselves of that as we move through life and we look at things like equity and inclusion, but then we have to go back and look and reflect on things we haven't learned about in years, and just being reminded and checking ourselves. Like I checked myself a lot today. Like I think I knew that, but I haven't heard about it or talked about it in a long time. So that's the lifelong learning that I'm just thankful that I get to do in my job on a regular basis, to meet people where they're at.
Beautiful, thank you.
I
And
would al-
go ahead. Was that funny?
Yes. I would add that do work in the community and with the community, and to remember though, even though I do identify myself as a Latina, it doesn't mean that I know everything about my culture or that I'm expert, that I know how they work or what would they need. So that self-check, like, okay, yes, I'm another community member, but I'm also a learner. I learn with you, for you, but in no means I'm not above or more better than you or an expert than you. That we walk side by side, and that's what we're learning. We're learning together. We teach one another, so it's like a more mutual learning rather than just a teacher or like more upper in a different way. So yeah.
I love that, Fani. And I was thinking about this morning that, for those of us that have spent a lot of time in higher ed, we're learners, we like to learn, not a problem. Our egos can take it. But I was thinking about my own culture as an Ethiopian American who spent 10 years at home, steeped in the culture here, but also in America, that for my younger years, I felt such pressure to know everything about Ethiopia, not just because people would be like, what's your name again? Where are you from? Where's that on the map? But even within the culture, there's this expectation that you are expert in it and that you know everything. And I think as I've gotten older, and it aligns with cultural humility, it's this letting go of that and letting go of, I am not the expert in all things Ethiopia. I mean, I'm one Ethiopian person with a particular experience, which is unique. And it kind of like makes my shoulders go back down. I'm like, okay, I can just show up as I am, be curious, but it also requires some letting go of ego. Like you have to have enough ego strength to say, I don't know. Can you tell me? I guess I should know, or I just don't know. Can you help me learn? It does require a different way of coming in, because people will put those expectations on you and in some cases shame you for not knowing everything. So this framework really is inviting us into that vulnerability, which requires courage, and courage means from the heart. So really moving into that heart space and saying, I'm here, I'm willing to learn, but I don't know. So that is principle number 1. So principle number 2 is really the next 2 principles are about the so what. Okay, so you have to kind of learn and be aware in service to principles 2 and 3. So principle 2 is asking us to recognize and change power imbalances. And here what the authors are talking about is twofold. One is that you have to see it. You have to see it, recognize it. And Jan, like what you were talking about reminded me of how structural racism is invisible for the most part. You know, you don't really see it until like I reading, you know, I do a lot of reading. I'm reading this book right now where she talks about like structural stuff and how baked in it is. So you don't even see it. So for principle 2, you have to be able to see it. You have to be able to recognize it. And then the second part of it is that you have to be willing to help fix those imbalances. And so in early childhood, think about all the power dynamics that you see. It could be between the teacher and the parent. It could be between the teacher and the child. It could be between the supervisor and the teacher. It could be between the state and the family. You know, there's all kinds of combinations of power imbalances possibly happening around you. So like, how can we start to recognize those and notice them? And then what are the places where we can help create more humane, more equitable spaces for each other? Like how can we start, you know, kind of creating a more welcoming and equitable space? So that's what principle 2 asks us to think about. An example of this that we wanted to share, many of you were involved with the FFN work that the state did recently. Don't ask me when it was, I don't remember. But for those of you that participated, you know that FFN providers, which is just a fancy word for regular people, care for our children in homes in our communities. And they care for the vast majority of our children. About 80% of kids are cared for by FFN providers. But the system recognizes and supports that 20% that's working within the licensed regulated space. So they get all the supports, the recognition, the awards, the money, but FFN providers are for the most part an invisible sort of childcare workforce in our community. And so this effort was headed up by the state, and it's the beginning of trying to rebalance that power dynamic where you know, there used to be recognition of FFN providers, that went away. It became a completely license-driven system. And now we're kind of swinging back around and recognizing the 80% that are out there. And there are efforts underway to provide more resources to understand their needs. And so this is an example of like, first you have to see it, and then you have to figure out how to try to rebalance that power. Who else has an example that they can share about power imbalances? It doesn't have to be big like the FFN state effort. It could be you and your kid, you know, recognizing that maybe the power dynamic there in a way that you try to meet them in a different way. Like who has an example they can share? I'm gonna start calling on some folks.
I had an example last time, but I think about this in the work that I do when we step back and we let the community lead initiatives that traditionally would have been done by staff. And so we work more closely together, and whereas before we wouldn't have thought about including them. So that's how it shows up for me.
Thank you. Allison, I'm gonna put you on the spot. There's a lot of power in philanthropy. right? Like how to, and I could pick on Jan. Maybe I'll pick on Jan instead. What, do you have any reflections on this?
No, some of you might know Lynn Haglin that just retired this last year, but one of the biggest lessons that she had in her 30-year career at Northland is the community knows best what they need, and we're just the catalyst to help them make that happen. And she also has a really neat philosophy of we take people when we can get them and where they're at. And while everybody starts at a different point, it's how we can serve them better, and work with them and be seen as a partner and not a funder. I think sometimes they look at funders and they view us as, oh, we're going to change stuff up, it's going to be bad. Whereas when they just shoot us an email and say, I'm going to switch my budget, and it's not intimidating, we're seen as a partner. And I think that's probably that power imbalance is we want to be with you along the way, and any way we can support them, that's what we try hard to do.
Thank you.
I'll ditto that, and just like also recognize that like the root of philanthropy is like based in like an unjust system, right? It's like rooted in like problematic power, hoarding, capitalism, all of these things. And like the more that we just like talk about that and like get it on the table, I think just sort of gives us this opportunity to like take a breath and be like, we're not just like I think that's when things get really really challenging, when you exist in this like cognitive dissonance of like, but I feel this, but I'm saying this, and I know this, and I don't know what I can say and what I can't say. And like, I don't know, just like putting things out there, I think just helps.
I agree. I think even if we can't find a solution, just naming it is like, oh, okay, I said it, like, but here we still are. What can we do now? Like, yes, I get it. I'm this, that, or the other to you, but I'm here. What can we do? I love that. Thank you both for sharing that. All right, so we go to the third principle, and then we're going to turn it over to our star, Norma. Is really about helping our institutions embody these principles. So if you can imagine, stretch your imagination and think about institutions that are like self-critical, reflective, lifelong learning processes, always on the hunt for like power imbalances and fixing it. Just try to imagine that kind of institution and how priorities would be set and how practices would be learned or unlearned, and how it might even feel to walk into that space. Like, can you imagine walking into a county office that is like embodying this at the highest level, or school that's really holding true to these values? It's hard for my brain to imagine that, but just imagine if that were how our institutions behaved. So here's another clip from their documentary about one example, if my computer will cooperate. Here we go.
It's really important to show up. Take the time from your life and show, that you care about the community and be there. And, so when the workers were participating in actions to bring pressure on a poultry market owner who owed her workers wages, the workers were going out with picket signs, and I went with them too. And in that way, I felt nervous. You do kind of feel exposed. You're in this environment that's very different from some of the other things that I had done. So when we had these meetings, everybody on the project was really experienced in doing community research. But there's this dynamic. When you're in a professional culture, you're used to participating in meetings and trying to get in your word, and then on top of all that, we're conducting all of these in English. And so the other two staff from the Chinese Progressive Association were interpreting for the English speaking staff member. And so they're not fully able to participate. And then everything's happening so fast, people are talking over each other, that for the non-English speaking staff member, it was hard for her to sort of get a word in edgewise. We did reflect on this and people noticed it. Then we started to conduct the meetings in Chinese, and then all the English speakers wore the headsets with simultaneous interpretation. The native English speakers were quieter, and that changed the dynamics a lot, but the workers were still quiet. In terms of cultural humility, we were really challenged to think, I think, a little bit more deeply about what culture is and how it doesn't mean thinking about a list of traits that you can ascribe to people, but that it's actually, that involves you and your assumptions and, how you project, your assumptions onto somebody else, and then versus what is their actual experience and who they actually are.
Can't hear you too.
Sorry.
There you go. There you go.
I was like cracking jokes to myself. I was like, that's a bonus soundtrack for you all.
Oh, there you go.
So a couple of things I wanted to draw out about that clip is that she talked about, so the institution was their association, so it doesn't have to be like the Department of Human Services. And their practice was the meeting culture, like how they were meeting, and then language was the part that they were really, that practice of like how is language a shared resource in our group was what they were noticing and working on. And it's so interesting to me that they switched to, the English speakers now are going through translation, and the meetings are now in Chinese, which was beautiful. But the interesting thing was that didn't necessarily solve the problem, right? Because she said people were still quiet, and that gave them pause. So it's like back to principle one, like more exploration, more learning. What else is happening in this space that people still don't want to or aren't, or whatever it is, not participating? It wasn't just language. So deepening kind of and becoming more sophisticated in how we understand one another is kind of what that clip draws out. So as we move to Norma next, we're trying to give you some food for thought, some richness to kind of wrap around what Norma is going to share with you all. But the last question is, what's an example of moving towards institutional accountability that you can share? Can be a small thing. Maybe someone that's not Sherry. Who is an example? Welcome, Zane. Who is an example of, we used to do it this way, but we don't do it that way anymore because it didn't support all of our brothers and sisters in that space? Who has an example? I know that a lot of state systems are trying different things with kind of how they contract and how money flows. I mean, these are not easy things to change because the systems are entrenched, but I know that there's at least conversation about, boy, it's intimidating if you're a community organization to try to apply for funding from us. Like it's, we need all but your blood sample to contract with you. So I'm seeing at least some conversation and recognition of that. Like, how can we, make things a little simpler so you don't need an expert or a consultant to help you put in that proposal, as an example. So that's one example of some practices that are starting to have some conversation around them. Does that inspire any additional examples that folks can share?
I'm not sure if this quite fits there, but just thinking about as we are hiring for new positions in some of our new work, that we are and state supported for a change, allowing a less experience and less education and bringing people in that will be able to work in their communities, and we can help them get the next steps that they need to bring them in and help them get the support and help them learn more about these programs so that we do have more participation in our communities of color, especially immigrant communities, that, you know, the language barriers are there. If we can get people in, even though they don't have as much background in early childhood per se, as what we've been used to hiring at and what we were told we had to hire at, we've been able to reduce that so that we can grow our own, I guess, kind of like our initiative foundation always said, so that we can bring from our community and not, I don't know, just have it be more balanced, because, and that for me, that's good for families because they see people that are like them, and that's going to draw more people to experience the things and the supports they need, but also just the support, the community support, to be able to know that, you know, that it's not a one size fits all. And I don't know, it's sometimes very hard for families to come in for help or trying to start something new because they don't have that background. So I think that being able to do that is going to be really helpful and expanding the community support there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great example. Thank you, Sue.
So that makes me think of like power dynamics too, right? It shifts the power dynamics when you have, you know, like staff that reflect the community. It's like the barrier to entry is so much lower.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, you know, the thing is that there's so many barriers there. You know, we have people that come with diplomas from another country, and then they can't get into the programs that we've always required. So just trying to work around that, because in the long run, it's better for all of us if we have a better representation in our programs, also in our staff, to serve the communities and to be in the communities that we're in. And then we get through that, we also get more knowledge. They bring more parents and family members to the table to tell us what they need. I mean, we really need that piece. That's been a work in progress to get to that point. So happy that it's there. And hopefully that helps equalize things a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison to introduce Norma. And just, I don't know if I already bragged on Norma, but I can never help myself. But Norma is, did I already do this? I feel like I did. Did I do this already? I can stop. She's just a remarkable leader in the community. And when we were coming up, there was no, like, these conversations were not welcomed. And I would watch Norma go toe to toe with people, and you can guess who was left standing. I mean, she's just been a tireless advocate for community in general, not just the Latinx community, but community in general. And she's just such a role model for me. So with that, I will turn it over to Allison to give the official intro of Norma.
Yeah, thanks to Hoot. So I'm also super excited to have Norma here. She's joining us to talk and have a conversation with us about cultural humility. I shared Norma's bio in the event description, so you can read a little bit more about her. But you know, I think I'm just particularly interested in hearing her perspective on this because of her deep leadership in the educational space. Right, so she began work as a public school teacher. Also, my cat has to join me for everything. This is given. She began as a public school teacher, and now she's overseen 2 schools that are really deeply rooted in the Latino community. But I think when I think about you, Norma, I think about your work really revolving around the sense of belonging, right? And like, how do we build a community and a culture where all people belong, recognizing sort of the multicultural world that we live in, and how do we support young people to build those skills to feel empowered by their culture and to know that that's a huge asset that they bring to this multicultural world that we live in. So just excited about the conversation. And am I turning it over to you, Fani?
Yeah. Yes, I am. I'm Fani, and my connection with Norma goes way back to middle school. She was my middle school teacher. So when she, in the beginning, when she was talking about, we do the work, but we don't teach it for now, it's like, I would say I'm a living experience of that. She has done a lot of advocacy, which I was like at middle school, I was like, what does this mean? I was like, I don't know. I'm just trying to get through school, trying to get things done. But now that I'm being able to connect with her a little bit more, seeing her work and understanding why she does the work that she does, not to be glorified, be like you're a hero, but more of like, our kids need this. They deserve it. They should have this. They should have the caring teachers, the caring staff, the caring community. And if there isn't, we're going to create that space. And so in middle school, she was my Spanish teacher. And it was the first Spanish class, not ESL, not for English learners, but a Spanish class, like with all students or other classmates that had they were learning how to speak Spanish, they knew how to speak Spanish, but were very selective or spoke Spanglish. And we just were a community. And I would say it was one of the most memorable class that I ever had. And I never had that class until college later on. Because we never had that. And my teacher spoke Spanish, which was rare, extremely rare. And to that level that she cared, that she pushed us, which at that moment I was like, this is too much. I don't get why you do that. And I know one time she pulled me aside. She was like, I do this because I know you can. And I was like, no other teacher has said that to me, and in Spanish. So I was like, okay. So that's my connection. And I have seen her grow. I've seen her do a lot of great things that I'm like, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you take care of yourself? How do you take care of your family? It's a lot of work. And again, to those systems that will put you down every single time you speak up, how do you continue to go against it? We'll do a little bit more of that talking as we go on later on, but it's good to be in the space with her. It's good that I can be a living witness and experience of her, of all the journey that she's been through and she's still going through. So it's good to be here with her. Sherry, are you going to do a little connection with her as well, or should I?
Yes.
Okay.
No, yes, thank you for that. So Norma and I worked in these systems, and so I'm thinking of Norma as a system warrior woman. Norma, you're always really clear about what it needed to be done, but the systems struggled to change. And so you were just talking about, you don't teach for today, you teach for the future. And so here we are, even in that moment, you were teaching the systems not for that time, but for the future. And they're just now starting to move. And so I just really deeply appreciated your contribution and your confidence in that we can fix this. So thank you for that. That's, we had an opportunity to work together. And so that's memorable to me. And then when Fani brought your name forward, I'm like, yes, Norma, yes, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's just like, it's always better and more fun to do things among friends, among people that you know, and that for whatever reason our lives, let's put this in perspective. We're talking about the last 30 years of my life. So seeing everybody in community and doing the things that you guys are doing is really rewarding. And many times I think we feel we're alone, and that we're doing this all by ourselves. And just to see, I know as a fact that a lot of my students are put somewhere, and they're growing and they're getting there. So they give me a lot of hope. So thank you for the invitation. It's an honor. I feel like, okay, I got my cup full from people talking nicely about me. I'm a executive director of a charter school. So for people who don't know, I'm like the principal, superintendent, everything of the institution. So not, people don't necessarily fill my cup every day saying good things about me. So, so thank you very much.
You have a big role, Norma, really big role. And when I found out that you were gonna be the executive director there, I was like, I am okay that children are gonna be okay. That gave me like a sense of like comfort, like I'm okay because she has been part of my life, and I know the children said in the academia Cesar Trevor will be okay.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I know. Yeah, so anything you want to say a little bit more about yourself, Norma? Otherwise, I can just go through what we planned for today. Just keep it going.
I think everything has been said about me.
Okay.
I think it's just, again, I'm just very honored to be here.
Yeah. Okay. And I know in the beginning you did share a little bit of why you do the work that you do. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
For people who were not at the beginning, I said that if God would ask me one day, what did I do with my talents that was given to me? I would reply that I build schools. I will say, look at my students in a little touch or a little interaction. I hope to inspire for them to make a change in the community that they live in, regardless of what the community for them looks like. Not just, I think when people see schools like where I'm at or at El Colegio, they think that we only want and care for the Latino community to do well. And it's far from that. We want to produce students who can work in intersectionality, that they know who they are, they're secure about themselves, and they can interact with others that don't look like them, that don't come from where they come from, that they are empathetic, that the empathy is so big that they can lead or they can serve in any way that they can because they know how they can work together.
Mm-hmm. That piece of self-recognition or self-awareness or identity itself, in our communities of Black and Brown children, it's always complicated because we don't know don't know how to navigate that, or don't know where to find that comfort or that space to be able to say, I think I'm this, or I think it's, or I don't know where I am.
Yeah.
I see that. Yeah. So it's huge. And everyone else, for the rest of them, please feel free to ask questions as we're going through, and just speak up or put on yourself off mute, and just ask questions. So what we kind of plan to have this conversation is more of like, the 3 principles. We have the 3 principles of cultural humility, and we wanted Norma to kind of share from her journey. How has she seen it? How she has felt throughout these 3 principles? What's more out there to learn from? What questions she has? So what is out there? So we're gonna go through each principle, and then I'm just gonna ask Norma a few questions so she can provide that practical example, a little bit more from her story, from what she has seen. Again, what's with that principle in terms of cultural humility, and how she even what is her perspective on cultural humility. So with the first pillar was the lifelong learning and self-reflection. Norma, you just said about that self-identity. So in your experience, in your journey, and still journeying, how do you help people be more self-reflective and be lifelong learners about their self-identity and the identity of others? How do you build that space for support of your staff?
Mm-hmm. I work with a lot of, like, I don't work directly, but I get to talk to a lot of young teachers who want to be in the classroom, who want to come to work at schools. And one of the things that I tell them that they always ask, what is the best advice that you give me advice. The best thing I can do, know yourself. You have to know. There's some of us that we make it to 50 years old and we don't know ourselves. And all of a sudden we go like, oh, I didn't like that I like that, or I didn't like that. So it's a journey throughout your life. But the more, I think the younger generations have done a much better job, and the platform has been open for them to find themselves, to know who they are, what they like. It's been open to that part. Versus, I think when I was coming up, it was given to you. And so when the young people are coming to my school or where I'm talking, I always say, find out what you like. Who are you? If not your boyfriend, not your degree, not your race, who are you? Like, what do you like, right? Because no one lies better to ourselves than ourselves. We really like to hear we tell ourselves sometimes the biggest lies, right? Like, my sister has this perception that she can eat anything. Every time we say, like, we should go out to eat, what do you want to eat? Well, I can eat anything. And I look at her and I go, you don't like mayonnaise? You don't like this, you don't like that, you don't like, no seafood, no. And she's like, oh, so that cuts like 30% of restaurants, right? Options. But she doesn't see herself as not open to other foods. Even though she doesn't go, she will be like, I'm not eating there. But I think knowing yourself and creating that space if you create a space for others to know themselves, you're gonna know yourself. Because genuine people attract genuine people. Yeah, go ahead.
In what other ways have you created that space? I know you work with educators, not just teachers, but through different educators. And then our people here, they also have different educators, or they see themselves as different educators. How have you created that space? Like, what else, in addition to that question, what else have, in your experience?
I think when you are creating a space that is being genuine about the purpose, we don't like, I'm sorry for the funders. I don't know who's a funder, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but I think many times organizations at the county, happens all the time, where organizations shape their mission, their vision to what they work, to what the county wants to hear, to what whomever wants to hear, to the funders, right? The funders, sometimes it feels like this. I never worked in a foundation that they woke up in the morning and said, let's get everybody dressed on purple. And then here we go, because we need money. We'll say, yeah, we're gonna have purple uniforms, right? That be able to say no, because we don't believe in purple uniforms. I can get purple shoelaces. I don't know, like, but I think being genuine with ourselves, honest with ourselves about that is not what we do, as creates that space where people gravitate towards that, like it's real, right? At El Colegio, we said we're gonna have a student voice, teachers who listen to students, who don't get scared of truth to power, that they're not gonna feel challenged because the student is saying, I don't understand what you're teaching. And we did. And it takes time, right? It takes a revolving door of making sure that people feel like, is this real? Because people tend not to believe that it's real. But then once it's real, you cannot lie about it. It is what it is. And people walking and feel being genuine. And I think creating those spaces is hard, because you gotta kind of find your people who are in the same. That's why values are so important. And I think people, when I hear about values, people wanna like, oh, we're gonna go back to the old values, and like, it sounds like 1950, and I'm gonna be like my Stafford outfit or something like that. And it's really about what do you believe in?
Mhm.
What is that you believe? That's what you should do.
Mhm.
Not just go like a kite and be out there and go with the flow. And do you actually believe? That's why it's so important when you're looking for a job. I tell people, look for an organization that shares your values. If you don't believe, and I'm going to say things that I'm going to shock you, maybe I don't know. If you believe that that love is love and there should be no gender and all of that stuff, then don't work for whatever it's called, Chick-fil-A. They don't support same sex marriage. They don't support. And if you do, then go eat there every day. But do you. But I think we go like, well, yes, but no, or, I don't know. And I think when you're younger, you're going to start figuring that out. And you're like, oh my God, how did I work there? How did I survive that place? And it's good because that's shaping your value. But I think start figuring out what your values are. I think especially when I tell my teachers, do you believe, when you look at Jose right here, who has been homeless half of his life at age 8, do you believe he's going to go to college and be a doctor? Because if you don't see that, systematically, he has not been an option. Not him, not his brain, not anything else, but systematically is what he has everything against him, then maybe you should not be working here. Go to a school that there's plenty who would not worry about that part. They're not going to make you think about that part. I'm going to make you think about that part. I love my community radically. And I want my community to do good to others that are in our own community and outside the community. So I think by talking like this, people are like, oh, I don't want to work for her. Like, I don't want to work with her. Or I do. It's inspiring.
You talk about, and many times those questions can be uncomfortable. How have you processed or handled that uncomfortableness with other people when you're like, I've heard it, I've experienced that uncomfortableness? How have you supported your staff in terms of how to process that?
It's like anything. I always bring out that picture that talks about the comfort zone and then the danger zone. And then, right, like when you get all excited about a little bit now and then, and like, what can I do and get all excited? And I think I always have it with me when I said, think about where you are at. I cannot tell you where you are. Because I recognize I'm the principal, right? So I'm telling you about something and I have to recognize the power that I have over you. Tell me what I want to hear. But at the end, it's like, I typically tell them, don't give me the answer. I don't need to hear the answer. Your actions will do the answer. Is what you want. Do you want to work here? I just sent an email that people, this is my first year in this school, so people found it quite controversial. Somewhere else, it would be just fine. I sent a letter asking them, in charter schools, you're at will with your contracts. So I sent a letter saying, next year, we're going to have conversations about intersectionality, LGBTQ community, racism, whiteness, class, privilege, all these things. And if you're not up to those conversations for whatever reason, there's plenty of reasons why people might not want to deal with that next year. This is your way out, and here's your form where you say you're coming back or you're not coming back. We're like, oh my God, but she said that. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about. So I don't want to hear next year that you don't want to talk about this because this is too much for you. We are going to be talking about race. Half of us are people of color in this building, and we need to talk about class. And we need to figure out how we create a system. The beauty of this place is that we create the system, right? I always show them a picture. The Department of Education is boxes, 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 and we're circular. We're circular people. We're rounded. So I make sure that within the box, the circles exist. So we gotta. I don't have a hidden agenda. I don't have any. This is what it is. Is our kids is best practice. This is what, right? We can go best practice. We can go all these things that professors love to do research and throw at us, and is what we need. Like this, my school, for example, went off mission and they were eliminating bilingual education when only 1% of Latino children receive bilingual services in the state of Minnesota. And about 30% of white children receive Spanish-speaking services. So when we know it's best practice, we know that's what they need. We know that's what makes healthier adults. Identity, they will know who they are through language, all that stuff. Yet most of our kids are not in bilingual programs. That's why we exist, and that's why we're moving forward.
Well, you definitely touched on the disrupting those inequitable systems, and education in itself is, I feel like we should tear it down and rebuild. At least from my own perspective. I mean, I've been part of that education system that, you know, ESL was like, you have to go. It's like an extra thing that you have to do because your English is not good enough. However, in the workforce, I need you to speak a second language and then you get a better pay. You know, you first literally tell me that I can't speak my language, my first language, and now you tell me that I need to in order to get a better pay or to be able to work in my community to show that I can. So how do you kind of work in that and kind of disrupt those systems that you be like, yep, I'm part of it, but also how do you disrupt that?
It's funny because when we get together, community organizers and people like that, they're like, I'm part of an organization that is called Education for Liberation. And they consider themselves disruptors, right? And because of my background, you'll know later, I just don't see myself as disruptor, even though I'm a huge disruptor. I see myself as a builder. And I keep saying, well, everybody has to disrupt. I have to build, because we cannot say we want more teachers of color and not have kids of color graduating from high school. We want more places to have people of color, but yet we don't educate them. So we're never going to fill those places. So it doesn't matter if the county tomorrow opens 30 positions for people of color only, we're not going to be able to fill them out because we don't have people who qualify, or they don't go through the systematic oppression that they have. Like, they're not going to qualify, trust me. Even if they're the best people to work, they're not going to qualify. So we have to make sure that from the ground up there, we're getting them where they recognize the power, right? So that's how I disrupt, right? Minneapolis Public Schools has never had the intention to serve Latino youth as they should. They'll know regret. I never felt bad about not serving them. And I knew that was not a place for me. I was not gonna go anywhere. So I ended up figuring out what I was gonna do. So I quit Minneapolis Public Schools to go to the county. But I learned about data, right? That you don't learn as a teacher. You don't learn in the educational system back then. You didn't know about data. You didn't discuss data. And then they were like the who and all this data and all these numbers and all that. I would be like, wow. Like they really move things through data, right? And why don't we do that in education? So that for me was like, it was never for me the intention to stay at the county forever, but it exposed me to a whole other world that when I was asked to come to El Colegio, it was an easy move in the sense of I knew my heart was there, and I knew I was gonna create a system that it will serve, it was meant to serve. So I don't know if you're aware, but there's a huge fight between charter schools and traditional public schools. They're always fighting, we're always in the paper. Charter schools steal money from traditional schools. People don't want to work with us because we don't have unions, or we're oppressive and all of that. So there's different types of charter schools that people don't realize. There's charter school, Minnesota doesn't have, for example, what is called CMOs, Charter Management Organizations. Minnesota doesn't even allow them to be here like in large scale, the way they are in Louisiana or California, Texas, Chicago, right? Minnesota, well, maybe, I don't know, we're never supposed to see that because they really respect traditional public school. Charter schools supposed to be independent, supposed to have their own board. So a lot of us are like that. And a lot of charter schools in the Twin Cities are led by students of color right now at this point. So when my old friends from Minneapolis Public School go like, can't believe you're working at charter school, like you're betraying, right, the union or whatever. I'm very clear to say, I don't work for a system. I don't believe in a system. I believe in our system that we will create that will serve our kids. I'm gonna work, if this school was part of St. Paul Public Schools and was doing this mission, and this was their vision, and this is where I get hired, I would be working for St. Paul Public Schools. So it has nothing to do with the big institution. It has what is the mission of the organization that I wanna work for, and what do they do? Then I'm part of that, otherwise I'm not.
Yeah, no, and can you say more about like the specific system changes? Because you touch on that, and I'm eager to know like what specific system changes have you done? Either being that at Colegio or the county, or now, like what are you saying? Like this is not working. We need to build this system for our children. Like what is it?
Well, the county didn't change anything.
Yeah.
In the Vatican. So it's like, you know, I learned systems at the county. I learned how things were like they analyzed the student data, for example, that we as a teachers were just giving it to us and we had no context over like, oh, people in the county actually sees it. Or third grade reading levels being viewed by the county to see how many beds are they gonna need for jails. Things like that. As teachers back then, we didn't know anything about that. So for me, I went to learn a system and how it impacted everything else, right? Truancy or I don't know what else we're learning there. Truancy and like child protection and things like that, like how it impacts our families. To the point that it gives me leverage now when I work with families to say, you cannot do that because you're counting, that's not your, when they're trying to manipulate families in a weird way. I think in the schools is creating our own, building our own. Nobody's gonna come and rescue us. No one is coming. There's no Superman. There's no Jesus Christ. There's no anyone who's gonna come and see. And my mission has been to create systems where our kids remember that we come from fishing people. We don't give the fish. So if you wanna work here, the first thing that I tell them, if you wanna work here, you have to remind these kids that they come from fishing people. If you wanna give the fish, this is not your space. And what I mean by that is that we were very self-sufficient, self-reliant. If our parents moved here, if the parents are moving here, just right there, they're not happy with the situation and they're looking to make it better. So they're not helpless, they're not anything but just someone who's looking for a better opportunity. And I think all of that gets to be disregarded, and we go into the missionary like, pobrecitos, and like poor this, poor that, and it's not, right? Like, we're gonna go through this. And I always say, together we heal, alone more trauma. So when we're together here, we're gonna be talking about it. And when the past election happened, we did a presentation at the University of Minnesota. And we put two groups of kids together, kids who had been with us during the election and kids who were in a suburban school district, but now they were both at El Colegio. And the experience of our students at El Colegio during the election was like, oh my God, we felt like we were going to be okay, because as community, we were going to stick together and we were going to see this together, blah, blah, blah. The kids who were in the suburban schools, extremely traumatized, scared of people, scared of white people. They never were allowed to talk about it. They were never allowed to get together and gather as in community because they thought it was going to be threatening for other people. No, like we gotta create those spaces where the youth feel safe and comfortable, just like, but at this point, my job is to make sure that the teachers feel safe and comfortable so they can do that with the students. So teaching, modeling that part, right? Like, sometimes I'm in meetings with my own staff and they're like telling me something. I'm like, Fanny, is that what I want to hear? What do you think I want to hear? Or what is your gut telling me? And they're like, well, Ms. Norma, you have kids. What would you do with that? Okay, so you think I should do that with the mom? Call the mom, tell her you're a mom, that you get it, that you know she's struggling, that you got it, but you gotta humanize. If colonization has done a really good job is to make sure that we don't look at each other as human beings, right? So I always ask my teachers, my white teachers, I said, okay, brown people, indigenous people, Black people lost a lot through colonization. What did white people lose? And they're like, nothing. I said, you lost your humanity. And you gotta rescue your humanity. We're not here to be saved. We don't want you to save us. You're not doing us a favor if you don't see each other as equal. You have struggles just like I have struggled. But I have, someone like me has completely benefited from colonialism. Right? Like if we were in Mexico, I'm educated, I speak English, I belong to an upper class, I'm 100% benefited. But my looks and the way I am doesn't match quite what it is. But I think humanizing, my staff is going to have every week for the rest of May, a whole training on humanizing pedagogies. Our kids are human, not just tests, not just, we're pushing a lot for early childhood. And by the way, I'm hiring 3 teachers for early childhood education, please. We're looking for doing more play in the younger grades, teaching Spanish is 100% in Spanish for preschool, and then is 80-20 in the early years. So that's giving them their humanity back. That's what, like, really what the work that we're doing.
Yeah, that was powerful. Sigurd, you had a question. Do you want
Yeah,
to
Norma,
ask?
you
or
kind
should-
of
Okay.
answered it already, but I was curious about, as we think about coming into these conversations with cultural humility, and we're more and more becoming a multicultural society, which is awesome. It also brings a lot of practical problems. In early childhood, for example, you have multiple languages in a room now, and you have multiple cultural paradigms in a room now about what the work should look like. And then you have, on top of that, because of colonialization, sometimes distrust also coming into the room, and and then you add in power dynamics. What have you learned about working in those spaces? I mean, you've sort of touched on this, but what have you learned about kind of holding that space for people? Not what comes up for you when I describe that? Because this is a very real thing happening right now, and people are struggling with that. And people want to do the right thing. They want to have everybody feel good and safe and do their best work, but it's challenging sometimes. What would you say to us about that, having worked in those spaces?
Something that is a daily struggle is, I'm sure all of you will identify with this, that the parents have a way to educate, and then we have our beliefs of how they should educate their children. And I think we have to make sure that the parents, I constantly reminding myself, they're doing the best they can with what they're given. Because we are so good, like when we get into these positions of being, no, now I'm gonna give you advice, Fanny. This is how you're supposed to do it. And this is blah, blah, blah. And just because it's different doesn't mean that it's wrong. And you have to be open to like, why is mom is doing this versus just going to this judgment, right? I sometimes, when I started doing more intentional work about restorative justice, you need to kind of like understand where people are coming from. Right? So mom always puts 3 sweaters to the kids and you're like, oh my God, is his mother trying to choke the children, or like, what's going on? No, she's scared that they're gonna be cold. Because back in Ecuador, she was not that cold, and here she's freaking out. And how do we, instead of judging her, we teach her, mire señora, maybe doesn't need that many, you know, what about this? Today, we got to talk to the parents a lot about the way they were educated is not sometimes even needed. Our kids through a phone have surpassed everything that we know. These are going to be the first generations that literally your kids know more than you. I want you to think about this for a second. When did you realize that you knew, at what age? Put it in the chat. At what age did you realize that you knew more than your mother or your father?
Did someone catch that? I can write it as well.
¿A qué edad pensaban ustedes? Yo sé más que mis papás.
So someone says at 8, 18, 20-ish, teenage years. Someone's like, I'm not sure I ever knew more, just different knowledge.
Exactly. But right now, if you ask the average teenager, they know more. And it's factual, because we get stuck with this and we're like, can you fix it? Can you change it? How do I do this? Right? Something with the cable is like, and you like, oh my God, it's too much for us. Like technology is like way surpassed. Like it's like we're full, and it's like, can you take care of this? And my son is like, Mom, all you gotta do, it's trying to teach me and I refuse to learn that part. Like I already know too much of this, like don't. And that creates a distrust with adults. I don't trust you because you don't know. Right? And now with being at home and with technology, that has the age has lowered to 8 to 7. Is different for, look who answered 8-13. The circumstances of your life. Either you were a young immigrant family, or either you had to take care of someone. The first generation oldest daughter gets like, they know everything for the whole family at age 9, because they had to translate for everybody. They had to fill out papers. They had to, all of that stuff. And that creates this burden on you that you have to do everything and that you have to create everything. So this new generation of kids with the phone access, with technology, with all this stuff, being home, learning, they're self-learners. We cannot give them the same advice as, let me say, how many of you had a conversation about human trafficking when you were growing up? Right? That would not at age 11. We have to have conversations here about human trafficking because boys, the average age is 7 for boys. So parents don't want to talk about it, but yet the kids are exposed to this all the time, to different stuff. So I have to break the news to parents like, yes, and we also have to do all this stuff. Like we gotta constantly like create those spaces where we're more holding hands with parents versus judging parents, right? Because we have a lot of teachers who don't have kids. I'm like, you have no idea what it is to have a teenager in your house. If you think you remember the kind of teenager you are, that's nothing compared to what this mom is dealing with this child right now. And we have parents that are working 17 hours. We have parents that, when I started my first month, our parents, I had a parent that just chewed at my staff, but she was rude, she was mean, she was awful. And all it was, sorry, is dismissal, so you're gonna hear me reaching out. They called the mom, she needed to come and pick up her son because her son had temperature. And the mom just went off and it was just awful. And she couldn't go get him. She couldn't find a ride or stuff. I said, I'll take the kid home. So I drove him home. When I got to her steps, she comes out with a baby. Another baby's crying inside. And I said, Señora, mil disculpas. I'm really sorry. Like, we could have just bring the baby to you. Like you didn't have, I'm sorry. Like, I know you have a lot. She just looked at me and she just started crying. So COVID and everything, I just went, everybody had temperature, so maybe everybody had COVID, I don't know. So I just went and gave her a hug. And I think the fact that we get to tell people, I see you. Just, I see you. Because yes, we are, she shouldn't never send the kid home with temperature, but she probably sent him home because she cannot deal with him in the house. Maybe there's no food in the house. Maybe there, and if he would have come and at least have breakfast with us and lunch, he would have made it, they would made it to another day with food because she cannot leave her house because clearly she has 2 more kids. So I think all these things that we have to trust who we're serving, that they're doing the best that they can with what we have given. But if you don't trust your clients, if you don't trust your parents, what are we doing? You have to trust them even when clearly you shouldn't. You have to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt that so they can come through. Because trust me, they've been judged everywhere they have gone. So we cannot be one more person that, so I think that part of like, when I'm a principal and I see parents being neglectful of their children, when of course all of that happens. Of course there's people who want to abuse the system. Of course there's, right, people, you as service providers, you're like, you have to fill out your forms. You have to do the paperwork in order for you to get the funding, or instead of like nasty email, like, how can I help you? How can I support you to make sure that you get the report in? How can I, like, because those things don't necessarily going to come up naturally. I don't know if I responded to the question. Maybe I went on.
You did, and I feel like you did a really good on wrapping up those 3 principles on what that actually looks like in the education system. Being in a place of humanity with your parents, with your teachers, educators, etc. Not being that one more person, be like, oh my God, here she comes. Just being human. I'm a mom, you're a mom. That's it. And that parents balancing their power. I'm not better than you or worse than you. We're here together, and that's how we can change that little internal and more self-reflective ability that we do. We can change that system and to build that system you're talking about, Norma. That it doesn't have to be this building, but it can be internal and more humane level, and that's the change.
Yeah.
That's the change. Yeah. Oh, that was beautiful. So I know we're like almost 30 minutes before our end of the day. We do have it open for questions right now. So from the audience, please, people, I invite you, if you have any questions for Norma about anything that she just talked about, anything or comments, clarifications, and then we're gonna send you to breakout rooms to kind of do a little bit more digestion and processing. But I'm opening it up for any questions, comments.
I just want to comment on the last piece where you said, trust who you are serving. They're doing the best that they can, because it's so easy to judge and to, I've got a deadline. Why don't you have my paperwork, whatever, but putting it into another perspective, you almost always get a story that would almost make you melt. Like, like you said, having sick children at home, or, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't listen, you never find out. And so I think in humility in that way, I think judging before you know all the story will bring you down pretty fast if you don't listen. So thank you for that, because I have it in very large letters on my paper to remind myself of that. That is something that I find more often than not, that if I don't find the whole story, I could become judgmental, and then it's a whole different story than I thought it was. So I try really hard on that, and I thank you for bringing that up.
Any last questions before we send you off to so we have a little worksheet that we've put together for you all, just to kind of see what comes through for you. What do you want to take with you? Where do you want to maybe ask Norma about? What are the nuggets that you want to kind of hold on to? So maybe we can just do that. I'll put that in the chat, and let me see if I can show you the worksheet itself here.
Do you want me to make breakout rooms?
Sure. So this is the worksheet. Sure, do you want to, oops.
Yeah, thank you. And I think 3 groups would be great. And if we could give you, doing a time check, I think if we came back at 10:02 just to hear from you quickly and close, that would be good. And so we're going to be, you'll be in groups of 2 or 3. I said assign a facilitator. You guys can read through the questions. You want somebody to be the reporter to report back to the group. And we're going to do a report out really quickly. With the time that we have, I'm going to ask you to focus on the questions 1 and 2 that are just asking you just sort of some basic questions to get you warmed up. But keep this information, because the questions that are in purple, 3, 4, and 5, take that with you. And, you know, it's an opportunity for you to ask questions of yourself from the conversations that we had today. And then if you could answer questions number 6 and 7, 1, 2, 6, and 7. And 6 and 7 is when you're going to report back to the group. Number 6 is asking, what do you think you'll do differently? And then number 7 is asking you about how should we move forward with our next session? And I think, yep, to put the information in the chat. It's a Google document. You want to grab that and take it with you.
All right, I'm going to open rooms.
Thanks, Allison.
So Sherry, I didn't assign you to a room, and then Tahoot, I can't assign you to a room. So I don't know if you want to stay here. If we should jump.
Yeah,
in
I can. Oh, did you move?
Stay
Norma?
here. Did Norma leave?
I put
No.
Norma in a room,
Oh,
but I can call her back if we want to.
I think we want to call her back. What do you think, Tahoot? We didn't tell her she would be in a room.
We can call her back. Maybe we can move. Ofani is with Sidayu. Yeah, we can call her back. I'm just thinking about Bonita and Jan then would be left in the room. It's kind of a small group.
Yeah, but if as long as there's a pair, it's good.
Okay, you pull Norma out. We'll pull Norma out then.
I called her back to the main session, but I think she has to accept it.
They're quiet today.
It's a gloomy day.
There's lots to, I mean, I felt like people were attentive, nodding. Yeah.
It's always, we can never ever tell.
Yeah.
Hi, Norma. Sorry,
Hi, Norma.
I assigned you to a group and then I was told not to. I pulled you back. My
Do you have
fault.
to jump off because your school's letting out, Norma?
No, it's taken care of. It's just, it's a loud announcement, your bus is ready and you need to hop on the bus.
How many
So,
kids are in your building?
550.
Mm.
It's a lot of kids.
The kids to be
A lot of
responsible for. That's
Oof.
amazing. I love it.
A lot of
a
kids.
lot of kids in the building.
And
Yeah.
it-
Norma, that was so great.
Yeah. I could listen to
Yeah.
you talk all day and like be like, have you read this book? What do you think of this thing? What is
know.
this over here?
and
Yeah,
that's one of the, let me show you what I'm reading right now.
See, and if
I
you
love
read
this
the
part of
book.
meetings where everybody grabs the book that they're
I love that the people are grabbing books, real
know.
books.
Because this is kind of like what we're going to be working on.
Oh, identity and achievement nurturing, confidence, confidence. How do you say it? Confidence.
We're
Nurturing.
Confianza.
Confianza.
Is trust.
I like it.
Because we get now the second, third generation Latino parents that absolutely do not trust the educational system.
Right.
So
Where do they want their kids to go? Like, I was intrigued by your comment about the kid going to medical school. Where do those kids, where would he go? He or she go?
What do you mean?
Like, I'd be like, of course you can go to medical school. You know, we're gonna support you with your mobility. Like, I would just try to fix everything and be like, yes, you should go become a doctor. We need you to be a doctor.
I think in elementary is very different than middle school and high school, because our parents, just like with the sports, Latino parents don't realize that if they want them to be playing soccer in college or in high school, they need to be playing soccer in kindergarten. So just like that, now that I have like the 360 of education from K through 12 has given me a huge insight when I hear the middle school kids going like, I'm gonna go to this high school because they have a really good soccer team and I'm gonna be on the team. And I'm like,
Do you play soccer now?
no, I'm like, are you in a league? And they're like, no. Have you been playing formally? No. Okay, then you gotta be like naturally stellar, huge, and it's heartbreaking for the kids, right? So we still have kids that all they know what to say is, I'm gonna be a lawyer, and the kid reads at third grade level. So we have to be, I think that's where even the more reasons why in Spanish we have this difference between education and educación. Educación is, a school provides educación. That's the expectation of the parents, a whole child perspective. You're gonna match my values and you're gonna do this whole work with them, right? Well, education in the United States was not meant like that. It was meant for you to adopt the values that we're gonna provide here. Not very explicit because it was about white values. And we're gonna create these values and we're gonna move on. So in our perspective of educación for us is for life. So the fact that we can tell kids, you know, if you always wanted to be a doctor, the easy thing is that if they want to be doctors, something I learned in the last probably 20 years is that the kids that want to be doctors or lawyers, you can tell from very early. They have very distinct personalities. So it's not every kid tells you they're going to be doctors. Not every child tells you they're going to be lawyers.
The parents, though, do the parents say that?
Latino parents don't push degrees.
Oh, really?
Latino parents push character. Big time. And that's where they are viewed as not high achievers, not wanting them to go to college, not wanting them to. Any parent in my last 10 years that I was in high school will say their mental health is way more important than anything else that they accomplish, versus working with more parents who are more assimilated. I seen moms that are like, I know, she's a little depressed, but she needs to go get her SAT. Okay. Then, you know, the SAT is making your daughter depressed. Just, you need to hear that, and then you need to make the decision.
And she won't do well on her SAT if she's super
No, but
depressed.
we have parents like that. We have parents that are like, and I think in my time working with Latino parents, maybe 5 have been like that. Who the student needs, well, I shouldn't say that, because we have a huge chunk of community who will not put their kids in a identity affirming school because they want them to be mainstream. They want to mingle with the mainstream. And what the child is screaming to them is, I don't belong with these people. And you want me to be with these people at any expense? Okay, watch. I'm gonna. I didn't want him to know. And so I think he feels that pressure because he's been told he's very intelligent, and he is. He's brilliant, but he puts all that pressure on himself. I'm the one that I'm going like, whatever, because I have to pretend that I don't care a little bit. Because
Oh, I know. The minute you say go left, they'll be like, I'm gonna go right. I don't.
and he's
They do the
like,
opposite.
I'm not gonna be a community organizer, mom. I'm gonna be a teacher. I think he's gonna be a really good teacher, but he's like, I'm not gonna be a community organizer. I'm not gonna be a teacher. I'm gonna be all corporate, money. I don't want you to work past, when I'm done with college, I'm gonna pull you out of work and you're just gonna, and I'm like, I want you to be happy, right? He's all for the money.
That's funny.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you. I want to make sure that we respect your time and end on time, but just I want to do a little debrief on your small group conversation. And question number, what was question number 6 again?
Give me 1 second. Oops.
Here, I got it. Okay, yes. Where were you inspired to do things differently? Someone share what you guys talked about.
What was it?
Question number 6. Did you have a chance to answer that one? And if you didn't, just throw out what inspired you. Where were you inspired to do things differently from the conversation we had today?
Okay, so I know Bonita's not going to talk because she already volunteered me. We just talked about how do we leave space for people to talk and share and tell us their story and be open and have those pauses so we can learn. That was kind of our 6.
We didn't get to this point in the question, but I think if I summarize up some of the, like we talked about, what was so important to us was like thinking about this humanity and reserving our judgment in a way so that we can build trust in trusting relationships with the people that we are working with. And I think one thing that's so important in that is like you have to give time and like you were saying, Jan, space to allow for that to develop. Like you cannot just create that inside of a formulaic, whatever time table. So yeah, it takes, and to, I don't know, be able to not enjoy the ride is the phrase that comes to mind, but like just to be in that, be mindful and be in that and find value in that time.
Almost like there's no rush and it can't be rushed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Jan. Thanks, Maria. Fani, were you going to say something?
Oh, I didn't even know my mute was on. Yeah, I can say something. From my group, and I don't know if anyone else wants to talk, Bobby or Sario, but they were more thinking of the actionable changes, kind of they want to see or they would like to see is that kids and parents should learn in their primary language, or their staff should also speak that language in order to better support them and be able to build that relationship and that understanding and speak us the same language, dialect wise. So they really wanted to see that. And the other one said wanting to do more for the community or more for the people, just seeing people there, people's faces, just wanting to do more for them.
So one of the things that for the next session that we have, we were thinking about how we would spend that time together. You guys came up with this topic and it was great to research it. And I personally got a lot out of it. So you guys are fabulous. So what do you want to learn more about?
Hey, Bonita, I'll answer for us again. We said we just want to keep the conversation going because I think, it's that once we quit talking about it, it's just forgotten again. So how do we keep this on the table, but then hearing strategies and effective ways like Norma shared today of how, she successfully, and we do have a question for her later, but how she successfully has navigated and ended back up where she's at.
What other responses can you share with us? And if you can't come up with it today, you can always send a note to Allison. So what was your question? Does anybody else have any questions of Norma before we close? But Jan, you guys had a question.
So our question is, when you said to your staff, you said you put everything out on the table and said, this is what we're going to do. You did that in a charter school. What might that look like had you have done that in a public school versus a charter school?
I don't think it would have been possible. I think that's why I'm not in public school, in a traditional public school, right? Charter schools are public schools, but I don't have that independence. And I think it's going back to the values, right? I think it's very genetic when you go into a traditional public school. They serve all children. All kids are going to be doing this. We share all this value, like make it universal, yet parents pick schools and then they don't feel like they belong. They don't feel that they're part of. They don't feel like you just go through it, but you're not part of it. And when you are making sure that people just go through things and don't take ownership is the best thing you can do to then be able to control them. So so my answer is at a traditional public, it would not happen. But I think that's why when you give us the opportunity to create our own systems, it happens. It gives us, even when they're like, oh, you don't have all the resources and blah, blah, blah. I just told a story this morning about someone who came to my school and said, you're going to close, you're going to die because you don't have enrollment. And I think, you should merge with us. And we had very different philosophy. We're about the whole child. We have about lifelong learning. We have all these things. Mind you, I'm talking 10 years ago. And yes, we were kind of dying, but we were not going to pretend that we're not going to go out public and say we're dying, right? So dignity first. So we're like, no, we're not dying. I said, well, we don't share the same philosophy. I think you should. I don't know. I said, and I don't know why you're talking to me. This is someone from a foundation with a lot of money. And I said, I don't know why you're talking to me. I think you should be talking to my board chair. That at the end, that's who, if your board chair and my board chair think that we should merge. I have no say. I just work here, right? I just work here. He's like, you're gonna die. And he got up and left. So when his school closed, I bought the chairs. Just as I just needed to make the point. And I didn't need the chairs, by the way. I just bought the chairs. But I think that's when, for him, even he was in part of this other school, even though he was a funder, he was on the board and he had the power. He had the power to probably save the school of lack of enrollment and all stuff. But this is a school that they put in a neighborhood that didn't want any more charters. They went into the community and said, you need us. You need, like, how arrogant is that? Who are you to tell, you need me? Think about if it was a man telling us or a woman partner telling us, like, you need me. We don't need anybody. You know what I'm saying? So I think that is when these balances are like, we take ownership, and I'm ready to go to battle for my school, because my board shares those values with me. That's what I was hired. That's what I was to do. In my contract, it says to decolonize, indigenize the space in my contract. Right? So not everybody has that privilege that your contract says you are going to decolonize and indigenize the space. From our hiring procedures, from how we engage with parents, who are like, how do we do different things of making that we belong. So colonization, if you think about colonization, the biggest pillar of colonization is about everything that is leaving people out, right? You need to apply to be part of it. You need to have a membership. You need to have, that's colonization. Decolonization, you belong just because you're Jew. You don't need a membership. You don't need you just belong. So I give this example in Latino parties. People assume you know how to dance. Regardless of your race, your whatever, you're gonna dance. Get up and dance. You belong in the dancing floor, regardless of, I don't belong in the dancing floor, but okay, I'll play with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is, you just belong, right? Black families and gatherings and food and all stuff, like, you just belong. They're not gonna ask you like, who are you? Like, did you know? Like, you're just part of it. You go to church with them, like you belong. Yet in try to apply for an Ivy League or try to you know, all of those are very, the museum, you are clearly, you can see when you don't belong. Like, how are you dressed? Who are you? Like, you know, so those are the things that I think, you know, in Minneapolis have public schools, and public schools, the union would have killed my letter. I would have been called to the office to sign my resignation, because I'm trying to be divisive, because I want to talk about equity.
Thank you, Norma. Thank you. So I would like to leave us all with a quote that, there were lots of quotes today. When you hear the recording, you can jot them down. But one of the things that Norma said was, I need to love my community radically, or else it does not work. So thank you, Norma, for everything that you've shared with us today. Thank you guys for being here and coming up with this topic. And we're going to have some more conversation in the future. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Nice to meet everybody. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.